Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for stopping by. We are the Dodd Show. Today, I have a special guest, my very first podcast guest ever, and now he is back again. We're going to talk about his baseball career and things that he's just up to right now. I want to introduce a special friend, Ross Jones. Ross, dude, thank you so much for being a part of the show again, dude. I feel like you are basically my proof of concept if I wanted to do this for, I think it was like 4 months ago. And dude, thank you. If it wasn't for you, I would not be doing this.
So happy to be back. It's always good to hang out and talk anyway. So it's what we do anyway when we talk. Now we're just putting it on camera, but glad to be back and that you're enjoying yourself doing it. It's great.
It's been a real pleasure, and it's been good. It's been real good. I can't believe how many people watch, like just this little channel. And I'm very surprised. And, thank you for everybody for liking and subscribing. And, I just want to get into it. So the last time we had you on, we talked about your film career and we lightly touched about your baseball career. And, I don't know, you're just like one of my smartest friends. And like, I know you're very impressive. And I love the way you think. And, a lot of my friends that I have on here are because like, I just love the way they think and that I love who they are. So, and it blows me away, that you're also, you were a professional baseball player. And then I forget what year you retired, but, I tried doing my due diligence and I thought I said I would remember it, but I don't remember.
No, I played from 1980. I was drafted and started playing the last half of that year. And then the way the draft works goes in June and then you finish out that year. I played through the 88 season, and at the time, I just felt like I had got to the big leagues, and my career didn't pan out to the grandiose ways I had hoped it would. But at that time, I was just like, the negatives with a family were starting to outweigh the positives without making it and staying in the big leagues, going down between AAA and the big leagues, bouncing back and forth. I was like, I need to get out and raise my kids and do something else. So I left one unstable business and went into the film business and found a more unstable business.
But you still had an impressive career. I mean, like when you tell people or when you talk to people about just professional athletes, I mean, you are right off the bat, if you're in the majors, you're amazing. And I don't know if people realize that, but you're an amazing athlete just to even get into the majors.
Well, most people, I'm amazed at how much other people make of it. Like, I still get maybe 10 pieces of mail a week with people sending me baseball cards to sign and send back. And I'm like, why? Why do people still want, But it's like there are people who want every player who ever played for the Mets in their signatures, or I get people who are Royal fans. It's like that amazes me that, people make a bigger deal of it than I think they're going to.
Yeah, you did it though. You know what I mean? You lived through it.
But it's like, but the people outside, they're the ones that are always I'm like, yeah, I did, I played a little bit but you made it to the big leagues. People are making a bigger deal of it than I usually do. And that always surprises me that, that people are still caring about these things and wanting to get, baseball cards signed of me is, the fact that whether their collection is complete or not makes a difference if they've got my signature. I just find it hard to believe.
My boys want a picture of you and your signature for the studio. I was like, we're not going to ask them.
I thought about it. I was like, I could do it anytime, but I was like going to bring cards and stuff. And I was like, because so many people will send me cards and they'll be like, here, keep a couple for yourself. Or if they send you 8 or 9 or 10 to sign, you're like, because sometimes people will send me stuff thinking I've got stuff to send them back.
Oh, like a trade.
They're like, oh, will you give me a picture and send? And I'm like, I don't keep pictures of myself to send back. So sometimes I'll hold back a card or two to keep extra ones around. And
that's super nice.
On many jobs, not as much now, but years ago, a bunch of people I worked with would want them. So I would always keep some with me, like in my backpack or something at work, going like, okay, You never know who you're going to run into that was a big baseball fan or something, and so it comes up every once in a while, but it still surprises me.
I think it's amazing. I was telling my son Dylan, because he played Little League Baseball this year, and he was just like, Ross did this? I'm like, yeah, Ross did this, like, on a major level. And he was just like, oh, I'm like, remember all the videos I'm showing you of guys swinging and how to catch and maybe how to ground a ball, like to catch a ground ball? Like, he did that for a professional, like for a living. And he was like, wow. So, I mean, it is impressive. And I'm glad people still hold that as impressive.
The baseball part was amazing. I'm not going to diminish it. It's fun. When you get to play something you loved since you were a kid, and that was your dream to do it, and when you're realizing that, it's awesome. The business part of baseball and growing up, that was a tougher ride, and so there's trade-offs that have to be made, and it's like that was an eye-opening experience of like, oh, now here, let me introduce you to the cold part of the business, like you're traded or you're released, or like you got to go. Especially when you had a family and you get traded and you'd be like, you have to go now. And you're like, but they got to pack up the family and my wife's pregnant. And, it was, but doesn't matter.
They don't care. They just,
Some people care, but for the most part, it's like, you've got to be there within 3 days or you're in violation of your contract. So, and most of the time they want you like right now, like get on a plane and go now. And so those kind of things were the difficult parts that went along with it.
What were the most memorable aspects of being a baseball player? Is like, do you ever look back and just remember the fun times you had with your fellow athletes, or like, were there funny times like in the locker room?
Oh, it's done. Look, the hardest part of leaving was the guys that you get really close to. Like when you're playing during a season, like if you're going to play a 162 game schedule, you're playing 81 games at home and 81 on the road. You're traveling. You're spending more time, because with those guys, your family doesn't travel with you on the road for the most part. You are with them all the time when you're at the field at home and all the time when you're on the road. So you get really close to these guys. And then, guy gets traded, he goes here, goes there. But when you're done, it all disappears. And so that's the hardest part of it, is going away from the groups of people you get very close to. And you may live on different sides of the country or have other things going on. You've got kids and you're into their lives and stuff. So you lose track of all those people. And that was the hardest thing to get over, was missing the people when it ended, because the business part of it was tough and everything. And, but yeah, that was the interesting part that comes along with it, that a lot of people don't like to, they always want to glamorize all the cool stuff about it. And it is, when you're playing and you get to play in front of a lot of people and you're playing well, and when you feel the energy from a crowd, there's not a whole lot of things that take the place of that, the same way. But there was a lot of things that went along that most people don't realize what really goes into the whole life of a professional athlete, and what you're dealing with.
What are some of those things? I mean, I can assume injuries or something, or lack of seeing your family, or having to be somewhere on an important day where you really should be somewhere else, or.
Well, that comes up all the time. Once the schedule's the schedule, you got to go through things. Certain things happen, and depending on the teams, on what you're allowed to miss time for or not, is problematic. But the day-to-day things with the kid, you can't be involved in all of that stuff. The time doesn't allow for it. So those are the tough things. But the fact that it can change at a moment's notice, unless you're, there's maybe 10% of the players that are at such a level where things don't happen without them knowing about it for a while. The majority of players play on a whim without hearing anything about it. You could be traded, you can be released, you could be, and that kind of uncertainty is not easy to deal with, not knowing, and then, you're thinking about for yourself, but then how does your family deal with that? That's not, they can't get away from it, but it's not really what they signed up for, and what's going on. So the last year I played, my oldest son was in 4 different first grades before starting school in Florida, going to spring training in Arizona, moving up to Tacoma, Washington, getting released, coming home, going back to Columbus, Ohio. That was one season. And I'm like, okay, this is getting to be too much. So now, had I never gotten to the big leagues and lived that dream, would I have walked away at 28 years old? I don't know. But I was like, I got the taste, to say that, my dream of becoming a big league ball player happened, but now the negatives are starting to outweigh the positives. And back then, the money wasn't nearly what it is now. And so there was no big payoff for it. It wasn't like, oh, well, this is going to help set us up for the rest of, it was like, no, you're making okay money while you're playing, but I worked in the off season. That's how I got in the film business. When I was playing baseball, I had off seasons. And my dad was like, hey, you can come work with us. And I'm like, okay. I started doing commercials when I first went back. And that's how I snuck into the film business. Was I had an off season, and baseball would get done in October, and I'd be off until the middle of February. And in Florida, that was our busy season, was leading into the winter. So that's what I started doing. Started in commercials, and then Miami Vice came along, and I was working on that show for a bit. And then I'd have to leave for spring training and go back. But yeah, kind of lucked into another career.
Do you keep tabs with any of your old baseball buddies?
Very few, just because it's been so long.
Sure.
It's and none of them really, of the ones I was close to, were in my area or the areas I was as I moved around the country.
I just look at it, and I can only see it was like a real day job, being that professional athlete, because you guys have to practice so much to keep that A game to a certain percentage. And I'm talking just my own thoughts. I'm not by any means an authority on sports and able to say maybe what really might be going on. But I think that you see how much practice and effort that you put into it. I mean, it takes a lot to get to where you were and to get to where professional athletes are to be able to play. So, I mean, baseball games that I go see, it's pretty impressive to see that level.
Well, baseball was a little bit different. It's a little different sport in the way it's set up, in that you're playing so many more games. Football, you build up 1 week to play a game. You're like getting the heck beat out of you, and you have to recover and play a game in a week. Basketball's playing 81 games. Still, they're doing a lot of running, so they don't play as many games. Baseball's like a marathon grind. It's like every day. Like when I played, I didn't know what day of the week it was because it didn't matter. You went to the field. You didn't look forward to the weekend because it didn't matter. You were playing. It might be a difference between whether you're playing a day game or a night game, but you're going to the field every day. So there were times, I still to this day don't pay attention to what day of the week it is, and holidays will come up and surprise me because I'm not locked into a calendar, because so much of my formative years was just every day you just went to the days were the same. Yeah. And it's amazing that as long ago as that was, and I've lived a lot more life outside of it than some of those habits are still ingrained in me to where I'm like, oh, it's Saturday today and not Friday, so it's funny how some of those things last. But you go to the field every day, you do some work during, before the game, and then you play a game. But you get into a routine where you get your practice schedule is built into the games you're playing,
There's a water if you need it.
Oh, thanks. So it's just it's a total different thing. You have the spring training, you're off season, you're training and you're doing things, and you go through spring training, but then once the season starts, it's like you're there. Now you do some extra hitting, you do some field every day. You're doing fielding and things. You're doing on-field work almost every day. Every once in a while, especially when it gets into the the heat of the summer, you'll back off a little bit and they'll say like, oh, we're not going to take batting practice today. But for the most part, you go every day and you get to the field 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. At 5 or so, you're on the field, and you may have hit a little bit earlier if you came out, or if there's a batting cage. Now there's so many more of the facilities have, a lot more things available to you. But then you would be on the field taking ground balls, or outfielders taking fly balls and taking batting practice. And you go back in, the other team hits, then you come out and you take infield practice. You come back in and change, then you go out and play the game. And it's kind of a routine that you get into. So you're getting your work in constantly as you're going. That baseball is a sport that if you go too long without doing anything, like if you get injured for a while, like you hurt your hands or something where you can't hit for a while, it's not easy to get right back in and hit because you've lost those repetitions over time. And to step back in into live pitching again, it seems like they're throwing 1,000 miles an hour. So it takes a while to get back into. So it's just, you're constantly doing it so that you don't lose that edge as you go through the season.
Yeah. Do you still watch baseball now?
A little bit. It's weird. I've gotten to be more of a football fan over my lifetime than baseball. And maybe it's because I just lived it so much when I was playing that when I got done, it was like, maybe at first it hurt a little bit to still seeing it and everything, but football filled a void. And I became a crazy football fan more so than baseball. And I still like to watch it. It's just I don't often sit down and watch whole baseball games or anything. Yeah. I've enjoyed the heck out of watching the Little League World Series going on and stuff like that. That's fun to watch.
That's gotten pretty impressive too with the amount of production that goes behind that now. I personally am not an athlete. My wife, Angela, used to be an athlete. She played basketball. She did cross country and she ran. And when my youngest wanted to play baseball, I wanted to show him what it looked like a kid his age, which was very, very young at the time. He was 5. What it looked like, what a 5-year-old, how they would hit a ball. And, YouTube, they have some pretty nice videos of, just people that were in the same shoes as him. But then you come across this total, I don't know, the kid was probably born to play baseball, 5 years old and smacking it, and you sit there and think, and this little kid is crushing the ball, and, they're probably going to pick him up on not a professional little league, but where, they have these televised little league games, and then the scoreboard and the commercials and they have their names on the back. It just looks like miniature professional baseball players, playing the game. And I just find myself how young does maybe a player, or I should say, how old does a player normally get until someone says, okay, we have to watch that kid and someone's trying to farm them or trying to grab them?
Everybody's watching. I'm not a big fan of young kids getting pushed. These travel leagues drive me crazy at early ages of getting too serious too early. I'm a big believer in playing lots of sports, not focusing on one. I like kids to develop, because so many other sports, you learn some other skills where your footwork gets better. If you're playing soccer or if you're playing basketball, you learn hand-eye coordination or jumping, transition, different things. So I'm not a big believer in kids getting too serious too early. I like to get kids closer to getting through the middle of middle school, closer to high school, before you're getting too crazy. So that's kind of a bugaboo I have about it. But baseball's a weird sport in that it takes a while for kids to understand the rules and how you're playing the game. It's not an easy game to understand. To teach a young kid when he gets on base, when the ball's hit on the ground, he has to run. But if it's a line drive, he has to make sure it's going to hit the ground first before he runs off the base, because he can be doubled off if they throw back to the base. When the ball's hitting the outfield, can they make it to third base? Or do they have to stop? All these things that to play the game well, you have to kind of have a decent understanding, so where it's natural, to where it's not mechanical, or you don't have to react to somebody having to tell you what to do. You can see it happen and do it. That takes a little while. So to me, I like to see kids get to, 10 to 12-year-old age, that's where, to me, they can start getting, I think kids get too much instruction about the technical side of the game too early before they're able to deal with it. When they're young, I just want them to play.
Just have fun with it.
Have fun with it, develop a skill set, learn how to handle a bat, and to not be afraid of getting hit with the pitch when you're playing. There's certain things you have to get past. And some kids can't get past it. If they've got a fear of being hit by the ball, whether it's a pop fly coming at them and they can't put their face near the ball, or a pitch is going to hit them, you can't play if you're thinking of those things. And so it's a tricky game to get kids indoctrinated and get them comfortable enough to really start learning it. And I think where we make a mistake is trying to make it too professional, like too early. And kids, wanting parents who want their kids to, be really good and go, and they're already dreaming of them getting a college scholarship and going and doing things. And it putting the cart before the horse too much on it. And friends would come up to me with their kids like, "Oh, I want you to work with my son." And I'm like, "I'd be happy to, but how old?" "Oh, he's 7. I'm like, let's wait a few years. Let him get a little bit of a basis behind him so that he has a chance, because I'm just going to tell him things that he can't comprehend yet or he can understand them mentally, but he can't make it work physically. So let's wait till that catches up, So it's, to me, I think the one trend I've hated in sports, I've seen too much specializing in whatever your sport is too soon. And people getting to where they play one and it's like, no, I want to play this one year round. And because then what I worry about is kids get to high school level and it's become like a job already.
Oh, wow.
And they just get burnt out. I've seen it happen to too many people. I've had friends that were like, oh, they were so happy their kid was playing. And by the time they got to their junior year of high school, they're like, oh, I really don't want to do this anymore. And they're destroyed because they were waiting. That was the time they really wanted to see them blossom and do things. And it's like, yeah, but you burned them out too early, and plus if kids if they don't really like to love what they're doing, they're not going to, put the effort into it that it requires to get really good at it anyway. So you have to think, what are you trying to get out of the sport? Do you want them to just learn to play a team sport, to learn the social side of it and do it? Okay, that's fine. But now if you're already seeing them in a big league uniform somewhere and that's your goal, you're probably putting too much on them too soon.
Yeah. There's probably a lot of, athletes that wanted it bad enough that introduce the sport to their child. And, I've seen it even in the little league where a parent might be just a little too aggressive or just
I think
too passionate.
That's being kind for some of what I see.
Yeah. But, still though, like, these kids, you were once one of those kids that loved baseball and wanted to play it, and you got to be in the big leagues, and that is a testament to your skill level and what type of athlete you are. I even noticed like what kind of an athlete you are just being on set with you. Just seeing you be able to like walk as fast as you walk, as much as you walk from. Like, weren't you just over there? Wait a minute, now you're over here. Like, you could see that you have stamina. I think that when you're just doing your everyday life in the film world, I can see that athlete in you.
It used to be easier to see. It's it's not as easy to see as we've gotten as far along. But I appreciate you saying that. But yeah, I have to remind myself. It's like, hey, you were an athlete. You should be in a little better shape. You should take care of yourself a little bit. So.
No, so for folks that don't know, so when we're working on set, there is a lot of walking. I'm sure if he had a pedometer on you or like a step counter, you probably walk 13 to 20 miles a day, depending on, what set we're working on or what we're doing. But,
and when it was on the beach in Cleveland at the lake, that was no fun either in the sand.
Yeah. The baseball thing I wanted to ask you, because like I noticed that me and you both really appreciate food. Is there a food at a baseball stadium that you particularly like, or is there maybe something you're just too much of it and you're just not with it anymore, didn't like it?
Well, most of the stuff I wasn't eating at the field that much. We would, they would have food brought in and stuff. But I mean, there is something about baseball and hot dogs that just go hand in hand. I don't know what it is. They taste better at baseball games. Maybe when you're watching them and the atmosphere that you're in and everything that's there.
Well, the smell is there too. It smells amazing.
It's just different. It's just, I grew up, just the basics before. Now it's like, it's amazing. Some of the food options that are at games, it's stuff I'm like, wow, I don't recognize it. It wasn't like that. It was very basic, through the 80s when I was playing. So, but I know back at University of Miami, their big thing is they've got milkshakes that are like everybody goes crazy over. And so every part of the country would have their, like in Milwaukee, it would be bratwurst or something, and it was like San Francisco would have something wild, seafood, because every area would bring a little bit something different to the party, and that was always pretty cool, was, seeing the different areas. And then you'd go up into Canada when we play in the minor leagues. There was quite a few minor league cities we would go to. In the big leagues, when I played, I never went to Toronto. I just went to Montreal. But I would always like the different parts of the country or countries you went to and what little twists they put on, their idea of what ballpark food was. Or you'd go in the Southwest, when I played in Albuquerque in AAA, they would have nachos or different things, before that became a popular thing. So I always loved that part of it, was the stuff that was different for different parts of the country.
Yeah. I think that, food is very important in my life. I never realized how big of a foodie I was until I left Pittsburgh. I was kind of picky to maybe a handful of restaurants that were around, Georgia. If you get into Atlanta, then your food, there's lots of food to choose from. But when you're where we are right now, there are some nice restaurants, but there's not that like unique family restaurant where, they're throwing French fries or coleslaw on a sandwich like Permane Brothers in Pittsburgh. And maybe it's because I'm used to weird things like that I was like hoping Georgia would have a little bit of that. And there is to a certain extent, but not as much as I would like, because I would like more options around here.
There's certain parts of the country where they just take it to a different level, and there's certain places in California that do it. The Southwest has a few different things. You'll run into things in Texas you won't see in other places. Then you go through all the different barbecue places and, the difference. And I used to love how people would get so fired up about, oh no, Texas barbecue or North Carolina barbecue, or, it was like how the arguments you would get in over food. When I went in the film business and went to New Orleans the first time, I could usually, when I'd see my crew, a bunch of guys standing around talking, I'm usually thinking it's going to be about sports, girls, or cars, like NASCAR or something like that. And I walk by and I've got an argument going on with guys about who's the better cook and arguing over their recipe and who puts this. And I was like, whoa, did not expect to see that. And it was crazy, the little dive places you would go into, but get an amazing meal. And you would like, if I was home and saw a place like this on the street, I don't know that I'd walk in and think about eating food, Yeah. And so I love that when you go to different parts of the country and when you get introduced to their food culture and what's going on, it's just really neat. Yeah. And sometimes you get surprised by it, but that is fun to see how it's looked at differently in different parts of the country.
Yeah. I mean, like being that you go to different fields, one of my questions was going to be like, out of all the different baseball stadiums, what do you think had the, like, not only the best like atmosphere, addition to the food, and like addition to like the experience? Like, like, what was your favorite place to be, to go to a baseball game, to play a game?
Well, I'm a traditionalist. So to me, my favorite places were Chicago and Wrigley Field and Boston with Fenway Park. Now, Chicago, the whole experience, I like the city, I like the food. Some of the restaurants were just really crazy. Going out, our hotel where they put us up was right by Rush Street. So after we come in from a game, you don't go right to sleep. You know, you're wired after a game. So we would go wander Rush Street and come back in. I love that kind of stuff going on. And Wrigley Field, the fans were so close, and I love the old ballparks. And when I sat in the clubhouse, I felt like I could sense the old greats, that you could sense that Babe Ruth sat in these places. And when I was at Fenway, you felt it like, oh, Ty Cobb might walk in here. And I was always one of the last guys. I couldn't go in right after a game and like strip off my uniform, shower, and go. I needed a bit to wind down. And so I was like one of the last guys out of the clubhouse all the time. But when I was in those old stadiums and there was not a bunch of people around, I felt I could sense those people. And that was, I love that. And so Fenway and Wrigley were by far my favorite. Now, LA Dodger Stadium was gorgeous. Kansas City Stadium was gorgeous. Of course, it was AstroTurf at that time, which I thought was neat when I was younger, and then I kind of got to not like playing on AstroTurf. Now they've turned it back into a grass field, which is nice. But it was funny, after a while as a player, you realized you started judging the city by what the field was like and what the hotel they put you up in was like and what part of town you were in and were there restaurants around to get to quickly. So, and plus I always saw them in the summer. So I'm always thinking, boy, people are talking about Milwaukee. I liked it in Milwaukee. And then I realized, oh, I was never there in the winter. You know, I never experienced a winter in Minneapolis or in Milwaukee, you know, so maybe I got to hold back my my judgment until I've had that in it. But I still remember to this day when we went to Montreal. We had come out of New York, so I had gotten introduced to the New York subway system. We got on the subway in Montreal, and it was clean. It was pristine. You didn't want to spit, you know, it was like after being in the New York subways, it was like, whoa, this is a different atmosphere. And it stuck with me to this day. And so some of the things that you see in the different cities, even though you're with a very limited, you know, exposure to them, certain things will stand out to you in different ways. And the people are different in different places. You know, someplace they're really, you know, when you went up and down the Northeast in Boston or in Philadelphia, those were hardcore fans and they didn't like you when you were on the opposing team. You heard some interesting things. And I've got one guy's voice in my head from Boston that I'll never forget. It was a game we were winning. We were up by 3 runs late in the game, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself in the on-deck circle. And I can remember thinking to myself as I'm loosening up that, yeah, things are going pretty well. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. And it was quiet because they were losing. So, you know, when it's quiet and you hear one loud voice ring out and you kind of can hear it. Normally in baseball, all we're hearing is buzzing because you can't hear individual sounds when there's a lot of noise coming at you. Yeah. But it was quiet. And one guy, as I'm starting to feel good about myself, just screams out. And he's got this Southie Boston accent. And he's just like, hey, Jones, you're garbage. You're in garbage. And I started cracking up because I'm like, he got me right when I was feeling myself a little bit. And that guy's voice is seared into my head. It's like, I'll never forget him.
Oh, man. That's, you know, like I sit there and I just think about, you know, when I think about movies that I worked on in the past, I remember the tastes and the sights and the sounds and stuff like that. When your two worlds, your film world and your baseball world, when it came together on Superman and, you know, getting to Cleveland Stadium, what was that like? Did it bring back any kind of like vibes or smells or?
It was neat to see it again. Sometimes I was out in the outfield, you know, going around taking equipment around the places, and I'd look back and see the whole stadium. But it wasn't a stadium. That stadium didn't exist when I played. Yeah. They had an old, tired stadium that was, back when I played, teams used to threaten to trade you to Cleveland when they wanted to do something dirty to you, because it was like considered a graveyard. You know, it was like, it's a great sports town and everything, but the Indians at that time were really poor, were a poor team. But so that new stadium was a whole new experience for me and everything. So it was neat just being around it again, seeing it. But the fact of it being a stadium I wasn't familiar with and everything, it didn't bring back any of those. Like if we would have been at Fenway or something in Boston, where I played a number of times, that would have been like a different thing or something. But it was cool just to, you know, even just like where we kept the equipment, where we would walk through the outfield fence, you know, and going in, it reminded me of just being in the bowels of the stadium, walking to the clubhouse and the different things. It did give me those feelings of remembering what that was like, you know, to experience for the first time.
Did you ever have a other team or opposing team mascot ever annoy you?
Oh, you know, there was some things. It was funny how some of the things I remember, like there was in the minor leagues, I'll never forget, there was this one guy, he wasn't there at every game, but Portland.
San Diego Chicken.
Yeah, we're back. Yeah, the San Diego Chicken had left. He became just the Chicken.
Just the Chicken.
And because he wasn't the San Diego Padres mascot anymore, and he would go around to minor league parks all summer and put on shows during the game, and lots of fans would come out to see him and stuff. So he would put on all kind of shows, and after a while, you got to understand what his show was, and you would work into it, and he would use some of the same players, and he would come in and go, "Oh, good, you know, we did it," and he would get you involved in his antics, because he would do things in between innings as you're changing, you know, after you're doing infield in between the pitchers warming up, he would be doing some skit or something, and so those things were fun. But that was the period where they were starting to come out. Every team didn't have them, you know. It was like. I think the Philly Fanatic was probably there, and a few teams, but it wasn't all the, you know, every team having somebody and doing things. It was it was hit and miss with who had it. But I remember the guy in Portland was unbelievable. The Chicken actually bought some of his routines. He's like, "Hey, I want to do these," and he goes, "I'm going to pay you for them. What do you think if I give you $500 to take your routine?" And he would, it was really funny, but the guy was really good, but he must have had another job, because he only came on certain nights when they were going to expect a good crowd. But he had some great stuff that he did that was really funny.
Yeah. I feel like that the Pittsburgh Pirate was a good mascot. And then when Pittsburgh Steelers had Steely McBean come to become a mascot, I was like, what are we doing here with Steely McBean?
Yeah, that's not one I remember. I don't know.
Well, Steely McBean is kind of new. He came out, I guess, in like 2007 or 2008.
Oh, really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. But, you know, the Pittsburgh Pirates, they had the parrot.
The parrot, right?
Yeah. So it's like, I remember he would go and he'd like bite the heads of people with his big beak and stuff like that. So when I went to baseball games, which was very like few and far between when I was a young kid, I think I've been to maybe 2 baseball games as a kid growing up.
I love the new stadium they built.
Yeah. We have a good stadium in Pittsburgh for sure. But like I remember, you know, the T-shirts getting thrown out, and I remember one of the teams having a mascot, and they brought the mascot with them, and it was like the Pittsburgh Pirates parrot versus another team or another team's mascot, and they got into a fake fight, and it was hilarious. The day that I went to the baseball game, and they were like rolling around, and I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, like, how do they not have their heads fall off? You know, this looks, you know, very comical. And I sit there and think to myself, like, I thought it was real when I was a little kid, but now I'm, you know, just looking back at it, it's like, oh, it probably wasn't real, you know. But I was sitting there thinking to myself, some of these mascots were probably pretty annoying because, like,
well, some of them, the Phillies mascot did anger some players because he would do some stuff. He would get on back then it was a three-wheeler.
Bring that to you a little bit.
He would be on a three-wheeler riding around, and he would do some stuff that angered some players. And I remember he did something when Lasorda was managing the Dodgers that I can't remember what it was, but they got into a real, like, I think Lasorda might have thrown some punches at him or something. But But yeah, there's been some times that certain mascots, you catch the player or the manager at the wrong time and things aren't going well or whatever, you might get a different reaction to some of them. But I can't remember what it was that happened, but I seem to remember for some reason that the Philly Fanatic had angered a few people that he had, and some of the stuff they would do got a little bit crazy. I think they got reined in after a while but the Fanatic when he was driving around on that three-wheeler, he would be going, because you got guys coming in out of dugout and he's kind of zipping by in different places. You could have some incidents happen that might not be planned.
A real troublemaker.
I don't even if you're not trying to, you're trying to do something for the fans, but you've got cross traffic going through there into the dugouts and stuff. So yeah, things happen from time to time. It was interesting, but it's hard to, I can't remember anything that's sticking out exactly right now, but that flashed for whatever reason of the Fanatic causing a few.
I just think of the baseball movies, Angels in the Outfield, and what's that one where Major League or whatever with Charlie
Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
They usually take, they'll take some stories and some of the stuff was too crazy to even put in movies, but they'll generally try to, make something a little bit bigger or a little, take a little license in making something a little bit different. But there's, like I said, the nature of baseball in that you're there every day leads to the fact that, there are certain guys, you got to remember, every player is not the same. So you have starting pitchers that will pitch one day and then they've got 4 days off. And all they do is run in between. And one day they throw on the side. But other than that, they're sitting around watching. They get bored. And they do some things. So sometimes the players are doing things to each other that are out there a little bit. And then sometimes, I remember one time I was injured and two players had met two girls and they were really excited to go out with them after the game. And they told everybody. And they were sitting there watching the game. And when the game was over, they were just getting undressed out of their uniforms, getting the clothes on, and boom, they couldn't wait to get out the door. I was injured, so I couldn't play for like a couple months. So I was just hanging out around the clubhouse. I'd go back in the clubhouse during the game, for a half an inning. And I started thinking, hey, those two guys, and one of them was a guy who the Moneyball movie, Billy Bean, was made about. He was my teammate. And the other one was Lenny Dykstra. And I was like, well, wonder what happens if they come back in and they can't find their clothes. So I took their clothes out of their lockers and hid them. Didn't say anything to anybody. And just watched them come in and run through the shower and come out and then come back to their locker and, hey, where's my clothes? And just losing their mind. They were borrowing clothes from other people that didn't fit them to go out, and I didn't tell them. And when they left, I got their clothes back out and put them back in their locker the next day. But before they found them, they never knew who it was or what happened. And I just, and that happens a lot when players are around. When I was with the Dodgers, that was the most practical joking team I had ever seen. They had some guys that carried on practical jokes that went over years that they kept doing over and over again. Usually in spring training it would happen. But then sometimes during the season when guys start getting bored, they'll do some stuff. But it's generally guys who don't play every day or the starting pitchers who aren't playing but once every 5 days. And it gets a little It can get a little crazy at times.
Yeah, like, and I just sit there and think about all the different practical jokes that could go on, whether if it's that whatever that menthol paste that you put on muscles and like they put it on the jock strap or
Oh,
something.
yeah, that stuff would happen.
You know, like were there ever any other players that would ring true to the major league movie where that one guy was like, I don't know, some kind of a shaman or some kind of like
There were guys all those stories are basically takeoffs on different guys and different things that had been done. So you got to realize you're playing now. You got a lot of guys from the States, but we have a bunch of players from Puerto Rico, a bunch from Dominican Republic, Mexico, Venezuela. So some of these people are going to come in with their own. And another thing is baseball players are inherently superstitious because you're doing things over and over again. So guys, it's not hard for something to go from a routine into a superstition.
Yeah.
And so guys would certainly do things like that. I'm sure if you go far enough, you'll find somebody who, a Latin player who was a Santeria, or he would do this and he might kill a chicken or do something like that to break a slump, that I'm sure there's things like that have gone on.
Did you have any rituals?
I was more into I wasn't so much super. You kind of do the same kind of things. You loosen up the same way. You throw. When you're in the on deck circle, you probably swing the bat the same way and stretch the same way in what you do. But there were some players that were maniacal about it. Wade Boggs, when he played for the Red Sox, he ran to his footprints were exactly the same going from the dugout to third base, so much so that there were brown spots where his feet landed running out there. He would go out to loosen up before a game. Most our games started at 7:35, and he would go out to run a few sprints at 7:17 every day. And he would wait in the dugout when the clock hit 7:17. He would go out and he'd run his few sprints. Then he'd come back in and get ready for the game. Bobby Valentine, at that time, I think, was the manager of the Texas Rangers. He wanted to break his rhythm any way he could. He had the clock operator skip 7:17, set it up so the clock skipped from 7:16 to 7:18. Just to freak him out to see if he could throw him off. And he had, there were some guys, we played with a guy in the minor leagues that had a superstition that if you touched him, he had to touch you back. And so we learned about it. And so we would be running off the field and he'd be running in the dugout and we would touch him and run in the dugout. He would chase us around the field to touch us back. Even go into our dugout to touch it. And one time, his own team in the minor leagues, especially in the low minor leagues, when the season gets ready to be over, everybody packs up their car and they're ready to go. You're going to play the last game. You get showered up, say goodbye, and everybody starts heading back to wherever they came from. So the whole team waited until they were all out of the shower and all right. They all stood around him. They all touched him and they all ran to their cars, and they took off. He could only run around and get 5 or 6 guys before they were gone.
Wow.
So they're like, oh, we got him good. He can't get us till spring training. About a week later, everybody gets a letter in the mail, and they open it up and they go, you touched me. I was touching this letter when I signed it. You're touching it now. You touch me, I touch you back. My head, my game, I win. Sent that to every player on the team.
Wow. So the superstitions ran real deep.
Oh yeah.
With some
teams
players.
worried about some of them because I know when I was with the Dodgers, we had a couple of players and one pitcher that had a lot of superstitions. And they were worried that if everything didn't go just right, that mentally he was, ready to fall. So they were like outwardly trying to break guys of superstitions and things like that. But usually they just left it alone because it was like, look, whatever's going on in your head, whatever the performance is what's going to is what's going to dictate it. But every once in a while you get a player where you go like, we really like this player, but we want to break him of that. And sometimes they try and sometimes they leave it alone. It was different, but it was everywhere in baseball.
Yeah. How real was the Moneyball story?
Real in its intent, but then they changed a lot of things. I've seen interviews of players saying that the way they depicted them on that team wasn't right, but it was, the whole idea of the movie was about what the general idea was, that all of a sudden from baseball being run a certain way, where the way they looked at players and how they evaluated players was done one way for 100 years. And then all of a sudden these guys came along that started looking at these advanced statistics and different ways to look at players. That was all true. They changed some things in there to make it, in their mind, more a better story and things. They certainly played up some of the things that were going on with the players on the team. But a lot of it, I'm sure, was, and again, remember, there's 25 players on every team. There's, 6, 7 coaches on the team. And everybody, you ask anybody about a certain season or a period of time, they'll all have their own perception of what was going on. So you're never going to have anybody say, that was 100% of what was going on. Everybody will have some little take on it that's a little bit different. But I know David Justice was one of the players I saw him interviewed going like, they portrayed my character differently because it, fit a narrative, but it wasn't what was actually going on. But to a degree that the biggest thing was, I think the stuff about the statistical side of it and the way he interacted with the scouts about arguing with them about, we're telling you we like players who do this, this, and this. And they're like, Billy, we've been doing this forever. You got to trust us. I guarantee that went on because that's the way scouts thought at that time and how they evaluated players. You weren't going to get them to change their mind that they knew how. The hardest thing with baseball is it's like, if I'm out there playing shortstop and another guy's out there playing shortstop and the ball is hit into a position and I go and I get to it, you can't tell me whether next player would have gotten there or not, or if I don't get there, but this guy would have, because you can't put everybody in the exact same scenario. So statistics can tell you some things, but they can't tell you everything. But they certainly gave you an idea of how to value certain players that were not being valued at that time. So, and for the A's at that time, what really was significant was they didn't have a lot of money. So they had to figure out ways to get players that wouldn't be expensive. Like if you're a guy at that time and you were hitting 35 home runs a year and hitting over 300, you were going to be making X number of dollars no matter what. Now, you might not have been a very good defensive player. You might not have been able to run the bases very well or whatever. But because you did a couple of those other things really well, you were going to get paid a lot. They couldn't afford those players. So they were trying to find players that other teams weren't valuing. So in that sense, it worked. And the Oakland A's for a while were getting a lot more wins for the payroll that they were paying out than they should have been, getting. And there's still a lot of teams who have done well. You always hear about these small market teams that just can't afford to have the budgets. You look at what the Dodgers are paying some of these teams, it's crazy. Then you go to somebody like the Miami Marlins or the Tampa Bay Rays or the Milwaukee Brewers. They're not paying that kind of money. So they've got to find ways to find value in players in different ways. And that's what it allowed you to do in a lot of ways. Now, a lot of baseball purists will tell you that it's like, you can't only go on that. It's another tool. Now, there's still certain guys that can look through and go like, that guy wasn't successful in his situation over there, but if I bring him here, he can be. And those things happen. And it's a hard thing to do. It's not a science. It's not an exact science. So you're always going to miss on certain draft choices, certain trade players you trade for, certain guys you give big contracts to. Some you're going to win on and some you're going to lose on. There's nobody's 100%.
Yeah. So being a scout, do you think they still look for the same things that they did 30 years, 40 years ago?
Not exclusively. They look a lot deeper in a lot of different ways. Now, also, baseball has changed. Now, they value the way they're teaching hitting now. To put balls in the air was not what was taught when I was playing. Like, if you weren't considered a power hitter, they wanted you to hit the ball on the ground and from line drives to ground balls, not hitting fly balls. Now, they want guys putting the ball in the air. There's things that they've changed in what they value in baseball. It used to be that there were certain positions where they were defensive positions, catcher, shortstop, second base, to some degree center field, where they always thought that no matter how good a hitter you are, if you're terrible defensively, you're going to give up more runs than you ever account for. So that has changed to where now they try to put as many bats in the lineup as they can. There's very few teams that, stolen bases aren't as big a deal. It's coming back a little bit. The last few years, it started to come back. But they're allowing players who strike out a lot more. Some of the strikeout numbers they have now, if you had them back when I was playing, they'd be like, you can't play for us if you strike out that many times. You don't even put the ball in play. You don't even make the other team make a play on you. Now it's okay. It's allowed. So things have changed. The type of pitchers they want, the starting pitchers don't pitch much past the fifth inning anymore, to where it used to be that if they didn't give you 7 innings, you thought you had the wrong starting pitcher, So a lot of things in baseball have changed too. So not just the scouting, but the type of players they have. And whether it'll be interesting to see in the coming years whether guys that are throwing as hard as they're throwing now their arms can hold up and they can take that kind of pressure on the ligaments and muscles involved in throwing, because the shoulder is not designed to throw overhand. It's just you're tearing things up very often. So it'll be interesting to see. I've never seen so many guys throwing 100 miles an hour. That just didn't happen that often. And it'll be interesting to see how well guys can hold up over time, or how many arm injuries they're going to go through.
With the advance in medicine, with the stem cells and the different, I guess, ways to look underneath the skin tissue and things like that into the muscle, do you think that furthered the game for some of these pitchers?
Certainly. Guys are coming back from injuries that used to end their careers, more so now at times. But still, it's just, no matter what, like if you watch girls throwing fast pitch softball, a great pitcher can pitch almost every game, because they're throwing underhand doesn't put the stress on your shoulder that throwing overhand does. So between shoulder stress, elbow stress, ligaments and things like that, the strain on them is unbelievable. So, the surgeries have gotten way better. Certain things have gotten better, but what they're doing is they're just not pitching guys as many. They don't let them throw as many pitches as they used to. Now, the downside of that is when you don't throw that many pitches, your arm doesn't build up the endurance over time. So it's a question of what's better, teaching guys to throw longer so their arms build up endurance. But when you invest so much money in some of these players, you're trying to proactively head these things off beforehand. And so you've got guys that are trying to manage that stress and hoping that but you can never be sure.
Man. Yeah. I feel like talking about something I just totally don't know about baseball. What is the biggest misconception about being a player? Like when someone sits there and think, oh, they're a professional baseball player. Like, is there, I guess what I want to know is, cause like it is a full-time job for when you are playing, and there's a lot of, responsibility to keep yourself in a particular shape and mindset. I can only imagine that's pretty stressful to have to be centered. I mean, it's so stressful that people they create, sequences or, kind of like rituals that they do to make sure things go well.
Well, I think the biggest misconception from fans, people watching from the sideline, thinking that the differentiator is talent. And to a degree, you have to have a certain level of talent to get to the level. But the differentiator of the people who stay and play it really well is almost always mental. The mental strain of doing it. Now, like, there's not many people who, when they are doing their job is defined by statistics that are able to be viewed in real time by everybody who's watching them play or watching them work. So the fact that when you're not doing well, you can't get away from it. So every time you step up to the plate, they tell you what your batting average is right now. And they'll usually have, he in the last month, he's only this for this, and he's only hitting that, So it's out there all the time. It's in your face.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to change that over. Not everybody can deal with that. So the mental aspect of, like when you're younger and you're playing a few games, your idea of what you want to do going into a game is you want to have a great game. So whatever it is, you want to get 3 hits and 4 at-bats, or whatever it is that you're looking to do, you're thinking about having that great game. And if early in the game, it looks like it's not going that way for you, mentally, you can fall off a little cliff to where you're like, I can't have that good game. And all of a sudden, mentally, all these negative thoughts start coming in. So it's not how good of a player are you today. It's how many good performances do you give me during this week? Because you're playing every day, or this month, or this up till the All-Star break, or the whole season. So it's not that you're great one day and then you're non-existent for the next 3 days, and then you have another great game. You're having 3 games where you're having very little effect on the game for your 2, so it gets to be who can do it consistently over time. So you're doing it when you're not feeling well, when you're tired, you just took a long plane flight and now you didn't get a lot of rest in the hotel, and then you get up and you got to go to the game and play. Do you wallow in that negativity, or do you get yourself ready to play? Do you find strategies to get you through those times? The mental aspect of it in baseball, because of the length of the season and the fact of how many games you're playing, it gets to be this, like I said, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And you're just being worn down over time. Mentally, that gets to be a drag. So the differentiator is the guys that have talent, but that can bring the mental aspect of it to where they can perform over time. Because, let's say you hit 30 home runs in a season where you have 600 at-bats. What'd you do the other 570 times? So you can have a singular stat that'll make you go like, oh, wow, that's a great player. But what else did he do? What did you do on defense? Did you make bad base running decisions to hurt your team by running into extra outs and things like that? So baseball's always going to be a very difficult game to contextualize all those different stats and different things over a long period of time. But the mental aspect of being able to do it consistently over time, rather than great game here, nothing for the rest of the week, one great game there, 2 weeks you do nothing. At some point teams are like, we got to get somebody a little bit more consistent. So developing the mentality of and looking at it not as a singular game, but as a more long-term strategy gets to be the differentiator between the guys who make it long-term and don't. Some guys you see come in and do really well for a short period of time, and you're like, oh, this guy's going to be amazing. And then all of a sudden, everybody figures out, oh, he likes to do this, this, and this. And what happens when we do that? And once they make that, it's this constant give and take of we figure out what you can do and can't do, then we try to approach. And so you're constantly adjusting to their adjustments and going back and forth. And it's the same guys. You're seeing the same guys in the league over and over again. So who can make those small adjustments? Who mentally can deal with the length of the season, the ups and the downs? Who gets destroyed when there's negative press being about them? Now, I didn't deal with playing the game in the social media world. Some people can handle it, some people can't. You know, so
that's really interesting. Like you brought up the points where it's not about just being good, but it's about managing your life within the, like, oh man, I'm at bat. My face is on a big screen. I wish my batting average was better than that. Or I have an error, you know, on this game, and they're talking about it, like that added pressure. I mean, I'm so happy in the film industry. Every time I brought a piece of machinery in, or if I'm trying to stuff, it's like Bob Dodd had 2 curbs today, or something, or you know, like just yeah, that is a really wild thing. And then for someone to sit there and say, "Oh, I know how to beat, you know, the A's, or I know how to beat New York Yankees," you know, number 32, if he doesn't, you know, get a chance to click his left boot, it might throw him off. Or if you throw a curveball, you know, with doing the magic no hand glove trick, it always gets him. You know, it's pretty interesting that you guys study that as well. So that means you're watching videos of the teams and learning the players in a different way.
Well, see, back when I played, video was just coming in as a tool for training and scouting. All the scouting, everything was done by eye and people writing notes and everything. So you would go into a game. Let's say you would go into a series. We'd go into, if I was in Kansas City and we went to Minneapolis to play the Twins, you would have a meeting before the game and you would go over, you would have scouts called advanced scouts who were going to look at the teams you were going to play in the next 2 weeks. And they would follow the team for 4 or 5 days and get a sense of how the players are playing at that time. This pitcher, doesn't seem like his fastball's as good as it normally is. His arm might be hurting him. He's throwing more breaking balls, and they give you all these different breakdowns. They talk about the hitters. Oh, he's really, you know, in a good vein right now. He's doing really well, really hitting the fastball well. So they would talk to the pitchers about, he's having more trouble with the breaking balls, so you want to do this or this approach in this way. It was all these types of things. But what they did over time was they may have information on you back from when you were a college player because they were all scouting the same players. Then when you went to the minor leagues, they've got the scouting on all that. And they would just, like, I was a bad breaking ball hitter when I was younger. So when I would go to new leagues and people would hit, just throw in breaking balls. You can't hit breaking balls. Well, all of a sudden, I started wearing out breaking balls, and I could hear pitchers turning around to guys in the dugout going, "I thought you said he couldn't hit breaking balls," and stuff. And it was like, oh, yeah, I didn't used to be able to, but now I can, you know. So
that's cool.
So sometimes you turn those things around, but for the most part, those things will go at. You're playing against a lot of the same players. They come up together through the minor leagues. Once you get to the big leagues, players stick, about 60% of players are pretty stable in that league. So you have, they call it having a book on, because it was a book. They would have books on people and they would write down, some players wrote down every pitcher they faced and every pitch he threw to them in every count. And they would try to go. So like for me, I would try to go up and I would go like, well, I'm not going to look at when I'm playing on the Royals, I'm not going to pay attention to how pitchers are throwing to George Brett, because he was a left-handed hitter and a much better hitter. I'm going to look at guys who were a right-handed hitter like me, the type of player, not a power hitter, a guy who put the ball in play. How do they pitch that guy? And I'll draw correlations from that because they're probably going to pitch me in a similar way to that. They're not going to pitch me the same way they pitch, the most dangerous hitter in your lineup, for those guys. So you're always trying to adjust things, but you get as much information on people as you could get. And then They see how you react to what they're trying to do. If they're not successful, and one thing they'll do is if they're getting you out one, they're not going to stop. They're going to keep throwing that same thing until you prove to them you can do something about that. Then when they do, you go like, oh, now they have to decide, was that just a bad one of those that I threw? And am I going to get off it, or do I go change to something else? And that's where that cat and mouse game comes into all the time of they're adjusting to you, you're adjusting to them. But if you have a certain hole that you can't overcome and they can access that, like if you're a hitter and let's say you can't hit the ball waist high inside, but they can throw the ball consistently waist high inside, you're probably going back to the minor leagues.
Yeah, it seems like baseball is all about exploiting people's deficiencies, you know? I mean, it's like boxing, you know?
It certainly is. There's no question. And there's also, then there were some pitchers that I ran into and I was like, and I would tell them, hey, he's a good low ball hitter. And the pitcher happened to be a sinker ball pitcher that threw the ball low. And he's like, really? Where does he like it? And I'm like, well, you know, a little bit lower than the knee, he'll still hit it there. And he goes, okay, I'm going to throw it 3 inches lower. Mm-hmm. And they're going to try to take your thing that you like and make you chase something slightly out of it. And I went like, oh, there, now you're playing 3D chess with me here. Now you got guys like Greg Maddux that were just playing at a different level and didn't only exploit your weaknesses, but exploited your strengths to get you to go after something just outside of where now there aren't many pitchers that could be that precise and throw things. And then the other thing was, when a pitcher did make a mistake to you, what did you do with it? If you make a mistake and a guy hits a single, you're like, okay, that doesn't hurt me too much. But if you make a mistake and a guy hits it in the seats and it's a 3-run homer, that's a big difference. Yeah. So the question is how many mistakes does the pitcher make? And when he makes the mistake, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
You know, do you let him get away with it and you foul it off, or do you hit it in the seats or hit it for a double that drives in a run? So, you know, just making a mistake, you know, isn't like even some pitchers used to say giving up a solo home run wasn't a mistake. A 3-run home run was a mistake. You can come back and still win if you're giving up solo home runs, but if you're giving up 3-run home runs, that's a whole different situation. So, it's an interesting game in that there's always this gamesmanship going back and forth. You pretty much know what guys are looking for, but can you get it there? You know, so for the pitchers, it's can they move the ball around in the strike zone, put it where they want it, and entice you to do something and make you hit a pitch you really don't want to hit.
Yeah. Is there a important inning for baseball players that are playing professional, like the 7th inning stretch, or I don't know, the first inning, if you don't do well in the first inning?
I mean, everything, what you do early in the game is going to affect how the rest of the game is played. You may get a pitcher out of there, you know, taken out early if you score some runs early or something like that. But for the most part, baseball has gotten to be very specialized now. So you have pitchers that are going to, if he's going to start, they're hoping to maybe get 5 or 6 innings out of him. Then they're going to have a long reliever come in that throws maybe an inning. And they'll go inning by inning with pitchers. And then if they have a lead, they're going to bring their closer in, the guy that they want to close out the game when they have the lead. So certain teams, you would have a strategy like you might want to, if you know they've got a closer that is really pitching well at the time and is dominant, you're like, we want to have the lead going late so they don't even bring him into the game. But those are things you're trying to do. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. So any inning more important, you know, just having more runs at the end of 9 innings matters. But it's like, depending on where you're at in a certain game, you're going to see different pitchers. Like, you don't know. There's no set course. You can't say, we're going to see that pitcher pitch this inning to this inning, that, you know, because it depends. If all of a sudden that guy's pitching and he's getting, and they planned on him throwing 6 or 7 innings, but he's given up 4 runs in the first 2 innings. They're probably taking him out and moving on to somebody else. So as the situation keeps changing, the whole game situation changes. So baseball games are constantly, the strategies are constantly changing depending on where you are in the game, what point of the game you're in, and who you have available. Also, you may go into a game where 2 of your pitchers have thrown an awful lot of innings and you can't use those guys. So your strategy is based on who's available and healthy to you in those games, as opposed to a game that might be played next week with different players available. So your strategy will be totally different depending on who's available to you. And the fans don't always know that because the teams don't always give out all that information. Like certain stuff they're supposed to divulge, but guys want to hold back as much information as they can.
Yeah. What's it like when what's it called? Overtime or
Extra innings?
Extra innings. How often does a game go into extra innings? Is it rare? Does it happen?
It's not
often?
rare. It happens pretty awesome. And they've changed the game. When I played, you just went into extra innings, and now they've realized baseball's changed some rules in the last few years. They've got a pitch clock now that a pitcher must throw a pitch within a certain amount of time, or they'll call a ball on it. They can only throw over to first base when a runner's on first base so many times. Because there used to be no time, that's what they always said about baseball. Like, there was no time limit. They could go on, forever. Yeah. But baseball realized it's a TV game that where most of their money is made, and they were losing fans, so they started changing things. Oh. One of the things they've changed is in extra innings, they put a guy on second base to start the inning. I hate that rule. It's really changed the game.
So they just put a guy on second base.
Put a guy on second base. They start with a guy on second base. And because, nobody wanted to see a game go 18 innings.
Yeah.
There's 3 people left in the stadium and it's 2:00 in the morning and you're still playing.
How many innings have you gone? What's the furthest? Do you remember?
I don't know if I ever went into 20s. There's not been that many games that have gone into 20 innings. I know I've gone into the upper teens, and it's just brutal.
Yeah.
You just want the game to be over because each individual game, you play so many games.
Yeah.
Each individual game, you want to say they all mean the same, but some of them you're like, the guys on the field are just like, somebody score, So I understand. The baseball purist part of me hates it, but I understand why they did it. That they need to get these games over with. I would love to see an experiment when normally what they do before they changed any rules, they experiment with them either in spring training games or in minor league games. I wonder what baseball would look like that instead of 4 balls you walk and 3 strikes you're out, if they went to 3 balls you walk and 2 strikes you're out. That will move the game along.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at ideas like how would you change the game in ways that don't fundamentally change how the game is played. Putting a guy on second base in every extra inning, in every half of extra inning, to me, fundamentally changes the game. You just gave a guy a leadoff double without doing anything. I understand why they did it. I just don't like it.
Yeah. I don't think I would like it either because it's like, hey, football's an extra quarter. We're not starting at the 50-yard line or 20-yard line from the other end. We're just going to start at the 5-yard line near your touchdown. It's like giving you that upper hand. It blows my mind that sports changes that drastic. Does that mean baseball players are getting smarter and better, or teams are getting smarter and better?
Most of the changes are just reacting to economic realities of satisfying television.
Really?
It has nothing to do with what the players are doing per se. They just needed to, what they did was they looked at identifying things that were making them lose fans. Certain players took forever to get in the batter's box and get ready to hit, or pitchers stood on the mound forever waiting to throw a pitch. there's certain things you can't get away from, that it's going to take time when you change pitchers and you're doing certain things. But they've limited how many, I think, trips you can have to the mound for a manager to do something without, actually moving players, making changes. But they're trying to, baseball was looked at as it was a slower game for a different time. All the other sports action was happening faster. And there were people that were even thinking, wow, if baseball was introduced now in this day and age, would it succeed? And it might not. It's hard to say that without having that years and years of backed up. I mean, baseball's been around longer than any of the sports professionally. It was being played prior to 1900, in the 1860s even though I'm not sure that was baseball. Some of what they were doing is, it was quite a bit different. But certainly since 1900, it's been pretty much the same game. So I get the fact that if you're going to survive, you have to find a way to stay viable and things. I just thought that some of the changes, I like the fact that the pitchers are getting the ball and pitching quicker. The fact that there's a clock on it, it just seems odd to me, but I get it. It's like when we played, there were certain pitchers you knew who were fast workers. And as a defensive player, you loved it because he put the ball in, he pitched quickly. He got the ball, he was ready to throw. The other guys who got the ball and they walked around and they picked up the rosin bag and they kicked the dirt, and you'd be like dying a little bit in between pitches, and it would make you less aggressive. And, so we would always say that the pitchers that worked quickly, the defense played better behind them because they were on their toes. They were more active, ready to play. So I understand it. It's just that nothing was changed for the longest time, that it was hard to see some of those changes, but I totally understand why they're doing it. Now you're seeing changes in football. They've got a different kickoff. I still can't get used to it. It looks so weird.
Different kickoff?
Oh, yeah. The way they kick off now is totally different. You have to kick the ball into a certain area for them to return it. The players have moved to a different part. They can't, the two teams can't move after the ball's kicked. They can't move until the guy catches the ball. They were trying, there were so many injuries on kickoffs where guys were starting 60 yards away, kicking the ball and running at full speed, and the collisions were so horrific that they tried to come up with a way. Teams were kicking the ball in a way that almost nobody was returning kicks, and they hated that. So they tried to figure out a way to bring the kickoff return back into the game. So this is the second year where they've got this different kickoff, but it still looks so weird to me. It's hard to envision.
Yeah.
And now if you want to do an onside kick, you have to stipulate that you're going to do it before. So you can't surprise anybody with an onside kick because you have to tell them, because then they line up differently, only for the onside kick. So it's very strange, but they're reacting to a certain amount of injuries that they were trying to get out of the game. But they didn't like the way the kickoffs had gone. And so, it's weird, but we're in a place where sport is reacting to, like football now. If you remember, games used to be 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the East. Now it's 1 o'clock and 4:15. That's so that game can get done. If it goes into overtime, they want that 4:15 game seen from the time it starts. That was that was something they gave for TV to get the games completed so that it's easy to switch over and have the fans not missing the beginning of the next game or whatever. So there's always these things that professional sports are doing. And now college football they're trying to figure out, they're changing every year pretty much what their thinking is on the playoff system and what they're going to do. And so it's changing very much, but all of it is in a way to get the most out of their TV audiences, because those are the money generators for the sports.
Oh, man.
So, you're starting to see changes based on that.
Controls everything. Man. Just, I sit there and I think, because, I guess I'm old enough that I can remember, stories of players from the, early 60s, whether if it's football players or baseball players from the 50s, you know, and there was a mystique, some kind of like regalness to being a baseball player and someone who could, you know, smack the ball. There was something about it because like I don't know if money really wasn't a big thing. It was like, oh, they're a player. And back in the 50s, did they compensate players with their abilities, or was it just like
They
happy
did,
to
but
play
they
baseball?
they gave them whatever they wanted. There was no. They had what was called the reserve clause, which meant every contract that you had, when it was over, the team had your rights for another year. So if they wanted you, you couldn't go anywhere else. There was no free agency. There was no way to go anywhere. That was in baseball. I don't know in football what they called it, but football's union took a long time to get any power and to get things in a better place for their players.
Is that why Bo Jackson or Deion Sanders played football or something like that? Or
no, they played because they could, but Bo Jackson started out because he didn't want to be drafted by the team that was drafting first that year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So he told them not to draft him. They drafted him anyway. He told them he would go play baseball. They didn't believe him. He went and played baseball. Well, Deion Sanders saw that. Deion Sanders was signed by baseball before he was signed to football. Because you were allowed in college football to play professional in one sport and be amateur in another one, even back then. The SEC didn't allow it, so Bo couldn't do it. But Deion, before his junior year, or before his senior year, after his junior year, the Yankees drafted him, and they sent him during the summer out to play baseball. He actually came and was on the last team I played on in Columbus, Ohio, for the Yankees AAA team. He came at the end. They moved him up a level to see baseball before he had to go back and play his senior year of football at Florida State. Players started using that as a way to get more money by threatening to go to another sport that gave them leverage to get a better contract or to not be drafted by a team they didn't want to be drafted by. So Bo's situation was much different than Deion's. John Elway did the same thing. He didn't want to be drafted by the Baltimore Colts. Told him that. They drafted him anyway. He was going to go play baseball for the Yankees. Baltimore.
So John Elway played baseball too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
John Elway, was that the
Denver's quarterback?
Yeah. Wow.
Yep. So those came about for different reasons, but the old system was they had you their rights to you. You couldn't go anywhere. So if they didn't release you, you couldn't go sign with another team. So that was taken up in court by Curt Flood, a player for the St. Louis Cardinals in the 70s. And that granted free agency. And then everything changed in baseball. So baseball changed first before others. The NBA was a different situation where their league was failing. They were dying. They weren't even on TV. The NBA championship wasn't even on TV. It used to be on tape delayed. It used to They would start it at 11 o'clock at night. It wasn't even shown live. Then Larry Bird and Magic Johnson came in, and that was the revelation, the rejuvenation of NBA basketball. But what they did was the owners actually came to the players and they go, look, here's the actual books. Here, there's no money.
Yeah.
How are we going to get there? And they created the salary cap situation based on a percentage of the revenue of the league. So they're like, look, in a sense, we're becoming partners. We all get together. If the league does better, there's more money in the pool for the players, and that kind of revolutionized their sport. Now that they've had a revelation that, and it's going gangbusters and they're making money and foreign rights and everything else, they're making ungodly amounts of money. Football went to a different system, but the injuries are so great a risk in football that the contracts are a little bit different and things like that. So all the sports are very different in how they approach things and everything. But it took the players fighting for certain rights to, be able to. Sorry about that.
No, no worries.
The to fight for some things to get their situation better, and there's this constant going back and forth, and they're fighting over a few things right now
Yeah.
that are going to be a problem for them. But their next contract, any strikes or work stoppages will always come down to when their new TV contracts are going to be negotiated. So that doesn't come up till like 2030 or 31, something like that.
Yeah, and I was just about to say, because these athletes are protected by a union, right?
Mm-hmm.
And right before we were starting the podcast, I was asking Ross about, in 1981, there was a baseball strike. And I vaguely remember there being a baseball strike, or worrying about, oh no, there's no baseball. And I totally forgot about it until, I was just like looking some stuff up. But the strikes, like, why, not why, did TV or television have a play in the 1981 strikes too? Or like,
It wasn't so much TV. The union was just forming. It probably started in the late 70s. So it was a new thing. The owners were used to doing whatever they wanted to do. They ran roughshod over, they owned the clubs. They set the conditions, and nobody ever questioned them. Now all of a sudden, players' unions are coming on. They didn't know how to react in this situation. So there were problems with, trying to set the parameters on what, the conditions were going to be. See, the leagues have a draft for players. Well, normally in work situations, nobody can tell you can only go work for this company. You can't go for anything else. So the players could take that and try to file lawsuits against it, saying this is unfair. You can't have a draft system. So the owners had to go like, well, if we want to, we're going to lose this one in court. If we want to have a draft to keep the players, so that if everybody, all the best players went and signed with the Yankees or the Dodgers and stuff, there'd be an unbelievable imbalance, and baseball wouldn't be that interesting to watch if the other teams didn't have a chance to compete. So they're like, we got to come up with something. So now the problem was the players want X, Y, and Z. The owners want A, B, and C. Okay, give me A and I'll give you X, and so that problem, that was going to be a bumpy road to go down. And that's what they were fighting over was, okay, what are the minimum salaries? What is this? How many games can, there's so many things that were up for debate. And the owners had things they didn't want to budge on, and the players had things. And at some point it was going to come to a fact that, well, we're just not going to play. And the owners going, we'll get other players to come in. And the players going, we don't think people will buy it. We don't think the fans will they'll go like, that's not a big league player. You just can't move all the players up from AAA and say that that's them. And so they didn't last a long time, but they were problems that had to be worked through. And now the NFL is going through some of them now, with where, they're arguing about, the salary cap and because now some players are getting paid so much money, it's eating up a certain percentage of their cap, where it's getting harder to sign the other players on your team. So they're running into some problems, like how much can you pay this player or that player? And so there's always going to be these things. And then the players will say, well, we want health care when we get done because they're getting so many injuries. And so, well, if you're going to do that, give us something back. So there's always these give and takes of what the players want and what the owners want. And
heck, I would want healthcare too. I mean, if I had 2 concussions from smacking my head off of something, or if I have a broken leg from sliding all the time into second or whatever, I would want to be looked after.
Yeah, well, those are the problems. Is that, okay, how long after you get done playing are you going to be covered under a policy? Or these are all tough problems to answer. And the NFL is, why are they have all these new rules about hitting players in the head and with the helmet? Because those are the things, big lawsuits over head injuries and things are things that they know could really change, the way fans look at the game. We all love the game. We love the violence until your favorite player isn't moving on the field. And now it's like, oh, now what do we do? So football players have different things that they have to work out and have to be concerned about. Baseball has different things that they're looking at, in what they're trying to negotiate over, and everything, but football generates more revenue than any league. NBA has risen quickly, but they still don't generate, what the NFL does. Baseball, I'm surprised the contracts I'm seeing given out that I didn't think baseball was generating that kind of revenue. Some of the new contracts they're handing, I was like, whoa, didn't see that coming.
Well, that I wonder what it's like because I don't watch baseball at all, and there's been a few times where, coming back to the hotel room or coming back from shooting, you get to the hotel bar to get your burger and baseball's on, and it doesn't look like the stands are full or packed a lot,
Depending on where you're looking, they're not, So those are the things they're fighting is like, certain places they do really well and other places they don't. You watch a Miami Marlins game or something and you might think they didn't open the gates some games, they're doing a little bit better recently, but over the last few years it's been poor. So yeah, the actual numbers of fans in seats, plus it's hard to get people excited when you're playing 81 home dates, and they're like, oh, I'll go next Wednesday or whatever, or I want to go on a Saturday game, or I only want to go when this guy's pitching. There's lots of different reasons why, people will be there or not. That's why the TV money is so important to them, because they're not making their money just from that, they're making their money from, their media rights, whether it's radio or TV, because they'll have a local contract as opposed to the national contract that they all share in. Certain revenue they get to keep, and they don't share all of the revenue in baseball like they do in football and in some of the other sports. So they're all a little bit different in how much revenue they make, how they generate it, and now when you see them playing games overseas, like they played the first college football game today, it was in Ireland. That's just to generate interest, and they're trying to generate fans in a different country. Baseball is trying to go big into Asia. That's why there's so many Japanese players playing here, and because baseball's big in Korea and in Japan, it hasn't got to China yet. So they want to open those markets up.
China doesn't have baseball?
I haven't really seen much. I don't know whether they play in the Olympics or not, but we haven't seen an influx of any professional players.
And they copy everything. I would be surprised if they didn't copy a sport.
Well, baseball was in the Olympics for a bit and left. Now I think it's coming back. Now that it's coming back to the States, so they'll probably have a team, because that's usually when countries that don't play it, when it becomes an Olympic sport, they usually start playing it because they don't want to be left out. In certain sports, because it's a lot of countries, it's a big political statement to them for, how their athletes do. So
interesting,
but it's getting to be bigger in Australia. It's really big in Korea, really big in Japan. So it's getting bigger in a lot of places. The NBA is getting big in China and in different places. There's always ways they're trying to get the Asian market involved in basketball. They're trying to get bigger in South America. In Europe, they've got a pretty good following between leagues in Greece and in Spain and all over the Baltic countries and things like that. So basketball is trying to keep expanding their international market. So, teams are constantly, or leagues are constantly looking to do that. And football just keeps doing it. Like now I think they're going to go play games in Brazil this year. And I think there's one in Spain, because they usually just go to England and play. They've gone to Germany a little bit, but they've got some academies over in some of these countries where they're trying to develop players. I know there's one in England. We've got a bunch of kickers that are coming from, there's 2 big kicking camps for punters and kickers in Australia and in Ireland. Where they're trying to take advantage of guys who grew up playing rugby to see if they can
hooligan places.
But
Man.
you see a lot of punters in football who have rugby backgrounds, and so that's become a big place that colleges are going to look for players. The NFL has these international programs in different places where if you get a player from an international that came out of one of these camps, you get to add them to your team in camp and not count against your roster, and you can try to develop some of these players. And there's a couple of really good players. Philadelphia has a starting offensive lineman that came out, was a rugby player in Australia. They're finding some players in different places now.
Very interesting.
The NBA is trying big in Africa, to take advantage of some of the tall athletes that are over there. There's all kind of academies that they've got trying to develop players over in some of those countries.
What if NASCAR tried doing that? Going to
Well, besides NASCAR with F1 and everything, there's drivers from all over the world, from South America, Europe, that's crazy. So yeah, everybody's trying to find people anywhere they can and expand their television market any way they can.
Yeah. I feel like F1 is like soccer and NASCAR's football.
Yeah, but soccer is like, you think about it, for the ability to get people playing it, you don't need a lot.
Yeah.
Even if your field is not big, you can still set up a goal, one ball, have a bunch of kids running around playing. It's easy. Now, when you start playing kids in football, you've got to get pads for them and, sign releases, and, the entry into it is much different, So some sports, it's much easier to get kids to play basketball than it is to create a baseball team or a football team, because the amount of people you need, the equipment you need to do it, you need a specialized type of field to play it on.
Yeah.
So some of these sports that, that you can just roll a ball out there and kids will start playing it. You generate, interest by the fact that if you get enough kids playing it, they're going to grow up to be fans when they get older. So it's, and everybody wonders, well, why isn't soccer bigger in the United States? Because most of our better athletes are playing basketball or football or some in baseball. So if you don't have your best athletes playing those sports, and if you don't have the big leagues where they see the players playing at the highest level and making the kind of money that they're making in other places, our better athletes are going to go to where they see, the better return to be. So it's a tough thing to, it's not the same playing field in all places where, what sports are your best athletes playing?
Yeah.
That's what'll lead you to believe where the best professional players are coming from in your country.
Yeah. Makes me think, where's bowling in all this? Because I know billiards is taking a real big dive. Not many people watch billiards anymore. I never hear anybody talk about bowling. Bowling used to be huge in the 80s. Like when I was a little kid, I feel like I knew about professional bowlers,
Well, I bowled, so I was, I grew up bowling even through high school. So, but I haven't paid it any attention since then. And, but yeah, it's, then you watch sports, and all of a sudden the Olympics are on and people are watching curling. And it's like, when have you ever heard about curling? It's like, that always cracks me up. It's like certain sports you only hear about during the Olympics and stuff. But then you'll turn on ESPN and they're like, why are they showing this? And it's like, well, we've got 4 channels. We've got to be playing all year round. But, you're seeing a cornhole championship and you're seeing, I'm like,
There's
what?
cornhole championships?
Oh, heck yeah.
All right, cornhole is kind of impressive. When you come across a very good cornhole player and they're just sinking the bags, and
if you would have told me that would ever be on TV, I would have bet a lot of money against it. It's like, I could, but then curling comes on and people are talking about it in the Olympics and you're like, what? You're sliding a rock down the ice with guys with I'm like, what is going on here? It just looked like a reason to get out of the house and go drinking, that now it's an Olympic sport. So yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, I won't say too much about it because I don't know too much about it. I do know that it looks very, very silly. I mean, they look like some of the people, they're like psyching themselves up and it's just like they're about to go to war, like football players go to war, and they lean down and they're like, that serious face. And they're like,
I'm just like, what makes somebody an Olympic caliber sweeper? You know,
precision. Anybody that's good at precision.
You've got to be able to ice skate and push a mop. You know,
Yeah.
I don't get it. It's like, it's hilarious. But I guess if you live someplace where it's frozen during the winter, you've got to find some way to keep yourself occupied. I grew up in South Florida, so I don't know anything about snow and ice. So,
do you think if you grew up in like somewhere cold, like Minnesota, you might be a professional hockey player?
Might have been. I never thought about hockey. Never. When hockey came to South Florida, I was like, what? Hockey in Florida? How are they even going to keep the ice rink frozen? You know, it's like, it was hilarious. But the thing I didn't realize was how many Northerners lived in South Florida.
Yeah.
You know, how many New Yorkers and Philadelphians and Bostonians and Canadians were down there. Now, the Florida Panthers are like a thing. And, you know, last 2 championships in a row. And now, like, getting tickets to go to their games is crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, people are losing their minds over hockey in South Florida. And I couldn't believe it when it came to South Florida. I was like, in South Florida? Are you kidding me?
Man. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. I sorry about the little mishap before. I don't know what happened.
I wonder whether I stepped on the plug or something underneath or something.
You know,
anything's possible.
You know, my big toe has turned off that power button so many times. I'm going to have to find a better way to route these cables, but it's what we got. And I think that, you know,
well, you've already upgraded a lot since my first trip in. So who knows what is coming in the future as the studio keeps expanding.
Well, yeah, as you keep coming back too, I hope to have like new things. Like swag is something I'm interested in looking at and seeing if we can afford it to, you know, give hats and T-shirts away. And the Pinbox Productions, they're going to be giving away something, or giving us to give away something pretty big. So we're trying to hit as soon as we hit 1,000 subscribers, it might take a year or 2, who knows, but we're going to be giving something pretty big away, and we're excited for that. So if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. You'll be in the running. You don't have to buy anything. We'll have a YouTube generated like way of picking a name. So whatever the computer algorithm picks, that person will win what is going to be given away.
Cool.
I'll tell you off the air what it is, but I want to keep it somewhat of a surprise, because it might change. You know what I mean? It might even get better as time goes by.
Yeah, you might have a jump in subscriptions you don't anticipate, and next thing you know, you got more swag than you know what to do with.
Yeah. Is there anything that you want to tell these folks about, like whether to keep track on you or anything cool to look out for?
I wish there was something cool to look out for right now. So,
oh man, dude, you're so modest. I love it, man. But well, thank you very much for tuning in. You know, like, subscribe. It's always fun to have you over, Ross, and I love it so much that when you come by, man,
always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
You are so interesting to listen to. I love your outlook on things. It really makes it easy for me to understand things. And I think, I love it. But take care, everybody. I hope you have a good day. Get ready for